want to turn back now to the breaking news out of North Korea, where the Pentagon says Pyongyang has launched a ballistic missile. The missile reportedly landed off the coast of Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called an emergency meeting with his cabinet. The missile launch comes after the U.S. Congress voted to impose stricter sanctions on North Korea. Japanese officials are condemning the act as a violation of UN resolutions. This comes after North Korea tested a missile earlier this month on July 4th. Michael O'Hanlon is a senior fellow at the Brookings Center, and he joins me now from Washington. Michael, what do we know about this specific missile, and is it different from the other tests we've seen recently?
Hi, Meg. Nice to be with you. I'm afraid, though, I can't answer your question very well. We don't have a lot of information yet on this missile. There are some reports that maybe it's reaching as far as Japan's economic zone or even maybe close to territorial waters. But even that I haven't heard confirmation about yet. So this could be anything from sort of a, medium-range missile or even on the shorter end of medium range, all the way up to a longer-range missile that flew a trajectory that was modified in order to avoid overflying Japan directly. So we really don't know yet, I'm afraid, just what we're dealing with here.
Michael, we are hearing that the missile landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone. What does that mean? How significant is it?
Well, North Korea has been a bit reckless, frankly, in terms of not notifying anybody whether a test is headed for an exclusive economic zone or not. It could obviously be dangerous to any kind of a ship, and the odds of a ship being hit by a missile that doesn't even have a warhead on top of it are pretty low, almost astronomically low, but that's no excuse for complacency or wanton disregard for others. But alas, that's the kind of country we're dealing with in North Korea. So there's nothing particularly distinctive about this. It's bad behavior. It's also dangerous behavior, but it's sort of North Korea's way.
We do know that yesterday was North Korea's so-called Victory Day, marking the end of the Korean War. So does this test come as a surprise?
No, it wouldn't come as a surprise because, as you know, the pace of their testing has gone way up. And they're either trying to simply perfect the technology behind some of these medium and longer range missiles, so they essentially present us with a real threat to Japan and the United States, or they are trying to in some way signal or prepare sort of the ground for negotiation, trying to get our attention, force us to come to the table, or maybe even drive a wedge between President Moon and South Korea, who seems to want to negotiate, as perhaps would China, with the United States that so far is trying to maintain a fairly hard line. And so there are all these kinds of possible motives or some combination thereof. It is interesting that North Korea hasn't tested any nuclear weapons yet this year. That could be an aberration, and they may just be in between preparations for a device that could be tested soon. Or they may prefer not to reach quite that level of escalatory behavior, because that would be seen as probably even worse than most of these missile tests. And perhaps they're trying to therefore leave a little room for the possibility of a resumed negotiation, or at least try to prevent China, Russia, and South Korea from completely deserting them, even if the Trump administration is drawing a hard line. Anyway, as you know, trying to discern and divine North Korean intentions, it's a pretty murky and difficult business.
Very difficult indeed. Some foreign policy experts have been arguing that the window to act on North Korea, though, is closing. Do you agree with that?
Well, the window's closed. There is no window to act. I mean, if what you mean by act is to launch a preemptive strike of some kind or another, North Korea simply has too many ways in which it can hurt us already. I don't necessarily mean delivering a nuclear warhead against the United States. I still think that's in some ways the least of our concerns. But there are tens of thousands of Americans, military and civilian, who live in South Korea. The entire Northeast Asian economic zone, especially in Korea and Japan, is within range of a lot of the devastation that North Korea could wreak even right now. So I don't think there is any window for any kind of, clean preemptive action of the type that we might theoretically imagine. I think those options are bad right now, and admittedly getting worse, but they're already pretty much non-existent. We're going to have to pretty much fall back on what I think President Trump accurately realized was a long shot, but the only halfway decent strategy, which is to try to persuade China to tighten the economic pressure on North Korea. And China doesn't like to go down that road very far. So we've got to work to persuade them or even pressure them to do so. We may need also a new negotiating strategy, but the Trump administration doesn't seem very open to that possibility at the moment.
Considering this is still breaking, we haven't heard a lot of comments from world leaders. We're still waiting to hear from the White House. What are you expecting to hear from Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and South Korean President Moon Jae-in when they speak out about this?
Well, with Abe, just like with the Trump administration, you would expect a hard line. And there may not be that much new to say, because we've seen this kind of a test so frequently. I think 30 tests, or more than 30 tests of missiles in the last couple of years alone. With President Moon in Korea, it's a little more interesting. As you know, he's new. He has stayed with us on wanting to put pressure on North Korea over unacceptable behavior, but at the same time, he's trying to create the opportunity for some kind of diplomacy or dialogue with North Korea. So the good news is that he's not abandoning military preparations or economic sanctions. He knows that North Korean behavior can't be tolerated, but also he's interested in trying to explore some kind of potential for dialogue. Japan and the United States are not interested in that right now, and therefore the North Koreans may be trying to divide South Korea from Washington and Tokyo. That's a possibility, so I will be listening to the South Korean president in particular for his reaction.
All right, Michael O'Hanlon, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.